So now that we have heard about the many symptoms of depression, let's explore the cause. Why do some people get depressed at certain times in certain situations, or apparently for no reason at all, while others don't? So let's talk about that. What causes depression in some people, and what are some of the reasons for this in the first place?
Exactly. And it can be very different for so many people. And that's why it's so important to get it investigated, first within yourself and then others. It does run in our families. There is a genetic predisposition. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily wired to get it for sure, but we have to be more mindful of that. And then it could be like a series of traumatic events. There's trauma that happens in our lives, and sometimes a series of losses in a row, right? And could be work stress. It could be a combination of many stresses. Sometimes, too, it could be related to some, medical conditions,
Okay.
right? That we often forget about, right? That it's sometimes we label as depression, but they also link to other things, too, like thyroid or anemia. And there's all kinds of
I was thinking, and
possibilities.
what about side effects of a drug? Sometimes they can.
Absolutely.
You hear about,
Yeah,
if you feel suicidal, please talk to your physician. And I'm like, what?
exactly. Yeah.
That's crazy. Now, let's get deeper into what's the difference between depression and grief. Because if you're grieving, many times you feel like, well, I'm depressed because I've lost somebody or I've gone through something that's just making me grieve through it. What really is the difference, or is there a difference?
Well, there is a difference initially. Like depression is a mental health disorder, right? Whereas grief is a very natural emotional reaction to something that's happened, like a loss in your life, right? But typically the grief is very attached to the loss, right? And you're missing, say, a person in your life, and you're thinking the memories or your thoughts are not just negative thinking in general, like depression. With grief, it's about that person or how their life has changed. And typically over time, it gets a little bit easier, right? And it responds very, very well to grief therapy and such, right? And talking through your feelings. And
So it's probably possible then to be truly grieving, but then to get yourself stuck into a rut where it becomes depression and you can't seem to work through the natural stages of grief and start to come back to life. Is that
happens.
possible?
And that's when we realize it's more like a complicated grief, right? Or a double depression, it can be referred to as well.
Yeah, we're going to touch more on that too.
Right?
So even with grief here, it's like a double depression.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So we touched on too that some people are genetically predisposition, and we were talking during the break that I did 23andMe and I found out, a genetically predisposition to depression because of low serotonin levels.
That's right.
Which was validating for me since I had struggled with that and I saw it in my family, and so. For me, I saw that it's true, and you mentioned it. Yes, it is possible.
It is very possible, and it's nice that we have tests like that because often, ourselves, our families, my clients feel sometimes confused and even a little guilty or embarrassed. Like, I don't know why I feel this way. I have a good life per se, and it doesn't relate. It doesn't connect with what's really happening around me. And,
but knowledge is power, and that's what for me. I didn't find that as something negative, but I found it like, okay, great. I've been addressing it. I am addressing it, and this is a reality. So I also want to touch on the fact that, well, what about feeling depressed and the effects of environmental changes, like chemicals or toxins in our foods or less nutrients in the soil? Like, do all these
They all impact mood. And as you know, our gut is our second brain, right? So what we eat and most of the serotonin, when we think of not having enough of the neurotransmitters, are produced in our stomach.
I think that's really important for people to understand too, because we think, well, I can just eat that junk food and that fast food and it's not going to bother me. When we realize what it's doing to our gut and the biome in our gut, and that can truly affect not only our immunity with disease and viruses, but also our mood.
Oh, big time.
Then we have a lot to do about how we fight with that, right?
When we feel like crap, we eat like crap, right?
That's a good one.
It's really true. And the hard part, though, is that we biologically crave the foods that aren't good for us when we're actually going through a depression. Yes. We crave the sugars, we crave the carbs, and hence comfort food.
Yes.
Right? So it's hard to be mindful saying, I know I crave these things, but I need to really be careful with my lifestyle because that really regulates, I think, depression and positive moods.
And in our last 30 seconds here, I want to mention there's also seasonal affective disorder, which I suffer with and I have to deal with every single time the clocks change. So let's talk about that. Just 15 seconds. What is it?
It's very much like major depression, sometimes not quite as intense, but typically it starts when the time changes, right? Late fall and then early spring. I'm seeing this already in my practice, now that we're at the end of April, it starts to lift. People are like, I'm just feeling so much better.
There you go. Stay with us. We'll be right back.